The grand chamber of Zenith Prime Station stretched out like a cathedral of glass and metal, its walls transparent to the stars beyond. 7 massive thrones sat arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by a representative of the elder races who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Below them, in what could only be described as a position of supplication, sat the human delegation at a simple metal table. Admiral Jack Preston adjusted his uniform collar and tried to keep his expression neutral as the council speaker droned on about territorial violations and human ignorance of galactic law. 3 years had passed since these negotiations began. 3 long years of travel between Earth and this neutral station. 3 years of proposals and counter-proposals. 3 years of watching the council dismiss every reasonable compromise with barely concealed contempt. Preston glanced at his colleagues. Claire Morgan sat to his left, her fingers drumming quietly on her datapad. A sign he had learned meant she was calculating something. On his right, Ben Hamilton stared up at the council with the practiced, blank expression of a career military strategist who had seen too much politics mixed with warfare. The current dispute centered on the Kepler Expanse, a region of space where humanity had established 17 colonies over the past 40 years. The worlds were garden planets, rich with resources, and perfect for human settlement. No other species had claimed them. No archaeological evidence suggested prior habitation. And according to every galactic law humanity had access to, these worlds were legitimate targets for colonization. But the council disagreed. And they disagreed with the casual arrogance of those who believed their word was law simply because they had been in space longer. Speaker Thrinzak of the Valkyrie shifted on his throne, his elongated head tilting as his telepathic species often did when concentrating. The Valkyrie were mind readers, though they claimed to respect the privacy of other species' thoughts. Preston had never quite believed that claim, but it hardly mattered now. The speaker's voice echoed through the chamber with the artificial amplification that made even whispers sound like pronouncements from on high. The human delegation continues to misunderstand the fundamental nature of galactic territorial rights, Thrinzak said, each word dripping with condescension. Ancient boundaries exist whether your species was aware of them or not. Ignorance of law is not an excuse for violation of law. The Kepler Expanse falls within historical Valkyrie territorial claims dating back 12,000 standard years. Claire leaned forward slightly, her diplomatic training keeping her voice level and professional. With respect, Speaker Thrinzak, we have presented archaeological surveys of all 17 colony worlds. None show any evidence of Valkyrie presence, nor any presence of any spacefaring species, for over 15,000 years. Under Article 47 of the Galactic Settlement Accords, worlds uninhabited for more than 10,000 years are considered open for colonization by any species capable of sustaining population there. Crystalline form of Ambassador Luthrian of the Luminari shimmered. With what might have been amusement, the Luminari communicated through light patterns across their geometric bodies, and translators rendered their meaning into audible speech. The human displays knowledge of our laws. How charming. Perhaps next she will lecture us on their interpretation as well. Several council members made sounds that the translators interpreted as laughter. Preston felt his jaw tighten, but said nothing. Ben's hand moved slightly on the table, a subtle gesture that meant wait. They had discussed this scenario a dozen times during the long months of negotiation. The council wanted them to lose composure, to react emotionally, to prove the elder races the assumption that humans were too young and primitive to engage in civilized discourse. Claire continued as if she hadn't been insulted. We seek only clarification. Ambassador Luthrian, if the Kepler Expanse falls under historical claims, we request documentation of those claims according to the same Article 47, which requires proof of continuous cultural or territorial connection. We have found no such evidence in our surveys. Your surveys are irrelevant, Thrinzak said flatly. The Council recognizes Valkyrie historical claim to that region. The matter is decided. Your colonies will be evacuated within 6 standard months, and the worlds will be returned to their rightful administrators. Preston spoke for the first time in over an hour. And what of the 400,000 human civilians living on those worlds? Where exactly do you propose they go? That is a human concern, not a council concern, replied General Krekstar of the Threnox, his insectoid mandibles clicking between words. Your species expanded too rapidly without proper authorization. The consequences of that expansion are yours to manage. Ben finally spoke, his strategist's mind cutting to the heart of the matter. Let us be direct then. You want us to abandon 17 established colonies, displacing nearly 500,000 people, based on territorial claims that cannot be verified and apparently do not require verification. In return, you offer us what exactly? The council members exchanged glances, a complex dance of alien body language that the humans had learned to read over 3 years of negotiation. It was the look of those who believed they held all the power and saw no need to offer anything. We offer you continued participation in galactic civilization, Threnzak said. We offer you access to trade routes and technologies that your species would not develop on your own for centuries. We offer you the opportunity to learn from elder races how to properly conduct yourself among the stars. These things should be sufficient. Claire's fingers stopped drumming. Preston recognized the sign. His diplomatic advisor had reached a conclusion, and he suspected he knew what it was. They had offered compromise after compromise over 3 years. They had proposed joint administration of the colonies, offered to pay rents or fees, suggested independent arbitration, requested formal archaeological surveys by neutral parties, and a dozen other solutions. Every single proposal had been rejected without serious consideration. The pattern was clear now. Perhaps it should have been from the beginning. The council did not want compromise. They wanted submission. They wanted humanity to learn its place in a hierarchy that had existed for millennia. A hierarchy where younger races deferred to elder races regardless of law or reason. The territorial dispute was not really about territory at all. It was about establishing dominance. Furthermore, Threnzak continued, warming to his subject. The council has decided that the Kepler situation represents only part of a larger problem. Human expansion has been aggressive and poorly coordinated with existing galactic structures. Therefore, we propose that humanity surrender not only the 17 disputed colonies, but also the systems of New Boston, Riverside, and Canton Falls as reparations for the disruption your species has caused. These 3 systems will be administered by the Council for a period of no less than 50 standard years, during which time humanity will learn proper protocols for expansion. The chamber fell silent. Even the other council members seemed surprised by this escalation. Preston saw Ambassador Velthorian, the luminary's light patterns, shift to something that might have been concern or disapproval, but the ambassador said nothing. The crystalline being simply watched, waiting to see how the humans would respond. Preston stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that echoed in the vast chamber. All eyes turned to him, alien and human alike. He looked up at the 7 thrones, at the beings who had ruled the galaxy since before his species had invented writing. And he felt something inside him settle into place. A decision had been made, though perhaps it had been made long before this moment, building through 3 years of disrespect and dismissal. Admiral Preston, you have not been recognized to speak, Threnzak said sharply. I no longer require your recognition. Speaker, Preston replied, his voice calm and clear. I stand here to make a statement, not a request. Humanity came to these negotiations 3 years ago in good faith. We sought peaceful resolution to territorial questions. We offered every reasonable compromise. We respected your laws and your procedures. We treated you as the elder civilizations you claim to be. He paused, looking at each council member in turn. And what did we receive in return? Contempt, mockery, demands that we abandon our homes based on claims you will not prove. And now, after 3 years of patience, you demand not just the disputed colonies, but 3 additional, established systems as reparations for the crime of expanding into empty space. Claire and Ben stood as well, moving to flank their admiral. Preston continued, his words measured and deliberate. We came here seeking equals, and found only masters who expect slaves. We came seeking justice, and found only power. We came seeking peace and found only ultimatums. Therefore, effective immediately, humanity withdraws from these negotiations. We will depart Zenith Prime within the hour. The Galactic Council may contact Earth when you are prepared to negotiate as equals, rather than dictate as overlords.
Oh.
Council members spoke over each other in a dozen languages, translators struggling to keep up. Threnzak's face darkened with anger, his telepathic abilities apparently not having prepared high. For such a direct rejection of council authority. You dare. The speaker's voice cut through the chaos. You dare simply walk away from council proceedings? No species has ever shown such disrespect to this body. There will be consequences for this insult, Admiral. Severe consequences. The Council has ways of dealing with those who defy our authority. Preston looked at the speaker for a long moment, then did something no human had ever done in this chamber. He smiled, not with humor, but with the grim satisfaction of someone who had finally stopped pretending. Threaten all you wish, Speaker. Humanity is done here. We will defend what is ours. We will not yield to bullying. And we will not return to this table until you understand that we are not children seeking approval from distant parents. We are a sovereign species with rights equal to any in this chamber. He turned toward the exit, Claire and Ben following immediately. Behind them, the council continued shouting, demanding they return, threatening sanctions, and worse. Preston did not look back. The human delegation walked out of the chamber in silence, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor, leaving the Galactic Council in chaos behind them. The door sealed shut, cutting off the sounds of alien outrage. In the corridor beyond, the three humans finally allowed themselves to breathe. Claire spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. Well, that could have gone better. Ben actually laughed, a short bark of sound. Or it could have gone exactly as it needed to. They were never going to negotiate fairly, Preston nodded, already thinking ahead to what came next. The withdrawal was not impulsive, despite how it might have appeared. This moment had been planned for months, contingencies prepared, resources positioned. The council thought they held all the cards, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humanity would always bend rather than break, would always choose submission over confrontation. They were about to learn otherwise. Contact the ship, Preston ordered. Tell them we are leaving immediately, and send a message to Earth. Tell President Carter that it is time for Phase 2. Behind them, in the council chamber they had just abandoned, the elder races of the galaxy continued their debate. Still not understanding that everything had changed, the humans were not coming back, and the consequences of that decision would reshape the galaxy in ways none of them could yet imagine. 2 months had passed since the human delegation walked out of the council chambers, and the grand hall of Zenith Prime once again filled with the representatives of the elder races. This time, however, no human sat at the lower table. The empty chairs remained as a stark reminder of what the council members had begun calling the human problem. Ambassador Velthorian stood before his fellow council members, his crystalline form reflecting the starlight from the observation windows in patterns of concern and unease. The situation requires immediate attention, Velthorian said, his light patterns translating into careful diplomatic language. My intelligence network reports significant changes in human activity across all their territories. Military production has increased by 300%. New shipyards are under construction in 7 different systems. Fleet movements have become unpredictable and do not follow previous patterns. They have recalled every ambassador from Council Worlds and ceased all official communication. Speaker Thrinzek leaned forward on his throne, his elongated Valkyrie features twisting into what might have been a smile or a sneer. And this concerns you why, Ambassador? The humans are posturing, nothing more. They throw a tantrum like children denied a treat, and now they hide in their small corner of space, building toys to make themselves feel important. They will return when reality sets in. General Krekstar clicked his mandibles in agreement. The human military is insignificant. Their largest fleet contains perhaps 200 vessels, most of which are outdated by our standards. Any single council member could field 10 times that number. Their technology lags behind ours by at least 50 standard years in most categories. What exactly should we fear from a species that has barely been in space for 2 centuries? Velthorian's light pattern shifted to something that the translators interpreted as frustration. You misunderstand my concern, General. I do not suggest we fear them militarily. I suggest we are making a strategic error by dismissing them entirely. My analysts have reviewed every military engagement humans have participated in, mostly against pirate factions and minor territorial disputes with non-council species. Their tactical approach is highly unusual. Unusual how? Asked Ambassador Kethla Visservani, one of the few council members who seemed genuinely interested rather than dismissive.
How?
They accept casualties that would break any other species' will to fight, Velthorian explained. In the Battle of Proxima Station against the Wreth pirates, human ships held position despite taking critical damage when any rational commander would have retreated. 3 vessels were destroyed, but they completed their objective. In the Andros border conflict, a single human frigate engaged for enemy cruisers to buy time for civilian transports to escape. The frigate was destroyed, but all transports survived. This pattern repeats across every engagement we have data for. Thrinzek waved a dismissive hand. Bravery without tactical sense is simply waste. Any primitive species can throw lives away. Civilization is measured by the ability to achieve objectives with minimal loss. The humans are reckless, not formidable. Perhaps Velthorian conceded, though his light patterns suggested he did not actually agree. But there is another factor. Human ship designs, while technologically inferior, show remarkable innovation in maximizing their existing capabilities. They do not follow standard design doctrine. Their vessels are built with redundant systems that allow them to continue fighting long after critical damage. Their crew complement is smaller than equivalent council ships, but their automation is more sophisticated. They are adapting to their technological disadvantages in ways that suggest creative problem-solving. General Krekstar stood from his throne, his massive insectoid form towering over the chamber. Creative problem-solving does not overcome raw power, Ambassador. The Council has maintained galactic peace for millennia through strength. The humans defied that strength, and now they must learn the consequences. I propose we move forward with sanctions as discussed. Cut off their access to primary trade routes. Restrict their ability to purchase advanced technologies. Make it clear that defiance of council authority carries a price. They will return to negotiations within a year, broken and compliant. The proposal went to vote. Of the 7 council members, 6 voted in favor. Only Velthorian abstained, his crystalline form dimming slightly as he watched his colleagues make what he believed was a critical mistake. The sanctions were officially imposed, and messengers were dispatched to announce the decision across all council territories, far from Zenith Prime. In a secure bunker deep beneath the surface of Earth, President Helen Carter sat at the head of a long conference table. Around her sat the most powerful and intelligent people humanity had to offer. Military chiefs, scientists, economists, and strategic planners all waited for her to speak. The president looked tired, as anyone would after managing a civilization on the brink of potential war. But her eyes remained sharp and focused. The Council has imposed sanctions, she said without preamble, as we expected they would. Admiral Preston, your assessment. Jack Preston stood, now back on Earth after his dramatic exit from the negotiations. The sanctions are designed to pressure us economically and technologically. They assume we need Council technology and trade access more than they need ours. They assume we will bend rather than find alternatives. They assume wrong. He gestured to a holographic display that appeared above the table, showing star charts and production figures. For 3 years, while our diplomatic team kept the council talking, we have been preparing for exactly this scenario. We knew from the beginning that the council saw us as children to be managed, not equals to be respected, so we planned accordingly. Dr. Nathan Cross, a thin man with gray hair and intense eyes, stood next. He was the head of the Advanced Weapons Research Division, and he carried a datapad filled with information that would change everything. Mr. President, members of the Council, I am pleased to report that our research programs have exceeded all projections. We have achieved breakthroughs in 3 critical areas that will fundamentally alter the military balance. He activated the holographic display, replacing the star charts with technical schematics. First, energy weapons. Our new plasma lance technology uses magnetic field compression to create weapons with penetration power far exceeding anything currently in use by Council forces. Second, defensive shields. We have developed a regenerative shielding system based on quantum field manipulation. It can absorb and redistribute energy from incoming fire, making our ships significantly more durable than equivalent Council vessels. Third, and perhaps most importantly, faster than light drives. That got everyone's attention. FTL technology was the backbone of galactic civilization, and humanity had always used systems purchased or adapted from other species. The idea that they had developed their own seemed almost impossible. We call it the jump drive, Dr. Cross continued, clearly enjoying the shocked expressions around the table. Instead of creating a continuous warp field like Council drives, our system creates a series of rapid spatial displacements. The result is faster travel time and, more importantly for military applications, greater maneuverability in combat. Our ships can accelerate and change direction at rates that Council vessels simply cannot match. How did we develop this without the Council knowing? Asked General Rita Walsh, head of the Earth's Defense Forces. They have intelligence networks throughout our space. We developed it off the books, Cross replied. Research stations in uninhabited systems, communications, blackouts, need-to-know protocols. The Council's arrogance worked in our favor. They were so certain of their technological superiority that they never seriously considered we might leapfrog their capabilities. They assumed innovation follows a linear path. Humanity has never been particularly good at following expected paths. President Carter leaned back in her chair, processing the information. How long until we can field these technologies in meaningful numbers? The first squadron equipped with full upgrades is ready now, Cross said. Captain Lisa Raymond commands the EDS Valiant, our newest ship and the first to incorporate all 3 technologies. We have 12 more ships in final testing stages. Full fleet conversion will take approximately 18 months, but we can have a combat-ready force of significant size within 6 months? Which brings us to strategy, Preston said, taking control of the briefing again. Council believes they can starve us into submission. Instead, we are going to demonstrate that we are not the easy target they assume. We cannot match their numbers, not yet, but we do not need to. We need only prove that attacking humanity carries an unacceptable cost. He changed the holographic display to show the Kepler expanse, the disputed territory that had sparked the entire crisis. The Council will test us. We'll send a fleet to one of our colonies, probably New Dublin, as it is the most recently established and theoretically the most vulnerable. They will expect us to back down when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, we are going to bloody their nose. You are suggesting we start a war? Asked Secretary of State Marcus Webb, his diplomatic instincts clearly troubled by the idea. No, Carter said firmly. We are suggesting we defend our territory. There is a difference. The Council can choose peace at any time by recognizing our legitimate claims. If they choose war instead, that is their decision. But we will not be bullied, and we will not surrender our colonies to satisfy their arrogance. She looked around the table at the faces of those who would shape humanity's future. 3 years ago, we went to the Council seeking partnership. We were naive, perhaps, believing that civilizations thousands of years old would have wisdom to match their age. Instead, we found the same petty tyranny that has plagued human history, just wearing an alien face. We offered compromise, and received contempt. We showed patience and received threats. Well, patience has its limits. The president stood, and everyone else stood with her. Authorization Code, Carter Alpha 7. I am hereby implementing Operation Closed Door. All human borders are sealed as of this moment. No council vessels are permitted in our territory without explicit permission. Our colonies are declared sovereign. Human space, and any attempt to force their evacuation will be met with military response. We will complete our military buildup. We will defend our people, and we will demonstrate that humanity is not a species to be trifled with. She paused, looking at each person in turn. But understand this. We do not seek war, we seek respect. If the Council is willing to negotiate as equals, we will always be willing to talk. Until then, we stand alone, and we stand ready. The meeting adjourned. The various officials dispersed to implement their parts of the plan. Dr. Cross returned to his research facilities to oversee production. General Walsh began mobilizing the fleet. Diplomats prepared carefully worded messages to be sent to species outside the Council, potential allies who might see advantage in supporting humanity. Admiral Preston remained behind with the president. The two of them looking at the star chart that showed human space, small and isolated compared to the vast territories controlled by the Council and its member species. They will come, Preston said quietly. Sooner or later they will test us. I know, Carter replied. And when they do, we will be ready. The Council has ruled the galaxy for so long that they have forgotten what it means to face a real challenge. They are about to remember. Humanity did not come to the stars to bow and scrape before anyone. We came to build, to explore, to stand as equals among the civilizations of the galaxy. If we must fight to earn that equality, then we will fight. Preston nodded, then left to rejoin his fleet. The president remained in the bunker, looking at the stars beyond Earth, knowing that everything humanity had built might soon be tested in fire. But she did not doubt her people. Humanity had survived. Ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters, always adapting and always enduring. The Galactic Council was about to learn what that really meant. 6 months had passed since the Council imposed their sanctions, and Admiral Thronix of the Velkari 7th Fleet sat in his command chair aboard the dreadnought Eternal Vigilance. Watching the blue-green world of New Dublin growing larger on his view screen, behind his flagship 36 more warships maintained perfect formation, a display of power that should have been more than sufficient to convince any rational species to surrender. The fleet included 4 dreadnoughts, 12 heavy cruisers, and the rest a mix of destroyers and support vessels. It was overwhelming force, and Thronix felt confident that this mission would be concluded quickly and cleanly. "A ship's report ready, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. Revel carry features showing the calm concentration typical of their species. Scanning shows 8 human vessels in orbit around New Dublin. Their defensive formation is positioned around the primary colony settlement. No reinforcements detected within sensor range. Thronix allowed himself a small smile. 8 ships against 37. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, and he suspected it was the latter. He had reviewed their military history extensively during the journey to New Dublin, and while he had to admit their tactical creativity was impressive, for such a young species, creativity could not overcome such overwhelming numerical superiority. This would be a lesson, one that humanity desperately needed to learn. "Open a communication channel to the human commander," Thronix ordered. "Let us give them one opportunity to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." The view screen shifted to show a human woman in a dark blue military uniform. She appeared young by human standards, perhaps 40% of their years, with short brown hair and eyes that showed no trace of fear despite the fleet arrayed against her. The nameplate on her uniform read Captain Lisa Raymond, and below that Eds Valiant. "I am Admiral Thronix of the Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet," he began, using his most authoritative tone. "You are in violation of Council territorial decree. The colony of New Dublin occupies space that has been designated as restricted under Council authority. You have 1 standard hour to begin evacuation procedures. All human vessels will power down weapons and prepare to be escorted out of this system. Failure to comply will result in the use of force. This is your only warning. Captain Raymond looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and steady. Admiral Thronix, New Dublin is sovereign human territory. Your fleet is trespassing in our space. I recommend you withdraw peacefully. Any hostile action will be met with appropriate defensive measures. Thronix felt a flicker of annoyance at her audacity. Did she truly not understand the situation? He had 37 warships. She had 8. The mathematics were simple, even for humans. Captain, I admire courage, but what you are displaying is not courage but foolishness. You cannot possibly believe 8 ships can stand against this fleet. I am offering you a chance to preserve the lives of your crews. Take it. Your hour begins now, Admiral, Raymond replied, and cut the communication. The view screen returned to showing the orbital view of New Dublin and the 8 human ships positioned in defensive formation. Thronix sat back in his chair, considering his options. The human captain was either bluffing or genuinely believed she could win this engagement. Neither possibility spoke well of human judgment. He decided to use the hour to position his fleet more effectively, surrounding the human vessels so they would have no avenue of escape. All ships advance to optimal firing positions, he ordered. Weapons to standby, shields to maximum. When the hour expires, we will disable their vessels with minimum necessary force. The Council wants them captured if possible, destroyed if necessary. The Valkyrie fleet moved forward with the precision of centuries of military tradition. Each ship knew its role. Each captain had executed similar operations dozens of times. This was routine, or it should have been. But as the fleet advanced, Thronix noticed something odd. The human ships were not holding their defensive formation. Instead, they were splitting into pairs and spreading out, creating greater distance between each duo. Tactical analysis, Thronix commanded. Unknown strategy, Admiral, his tactical officer replied, her telepathic abilities allowing her to process multiple data streams simultaneously. The formation creates no defensive advantage. They are making themselves more vulnerable to concentrated fire. It makes no tactical sense. Perhaps they are preparing to flee, suggested his executive officer, splitting up to make pursuit more difficult. Thronix considered this but dismissed it. The human ships had not moved toward the system's edge, where they could jump to faster-than-light speeds. They remained in orbit, as if waiting for something. He checked the chronometer and saw that 45 minutes had passed. 15 minutes remained, and still the humans held position. Down on the surface of New Dublin, civilian transports were lifting off, carrying non-combatants to underground shelters designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Captain Raymond watched from the bridge of the Valiant as the last transport disappeared below ground level. Her crew worked quietly around her, each person focused on their assigned tasks. Lieutenant Kyle Peters managed the weapons systems, his hands moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. Commander Amy Liu coordinated with the other 7 ships in the defensive fleet, ensuring perfect synchronization of their attack plan. All civilians secured, Liu reported. All ships report ready for engagement. New systems are performing within expected parameters. Raymond nodded, her eyes fixed on the Council fleet that surrounded them like predators circling prey. She had read Admiral Thronix's service record, studied his previous battles, understood his tactical preferences. He was competent and experienced, which made him dangerous, but also predictable. He expected them to fight like a Council fleet would fight, using conventional tactics and conventional technology. He was about to learn that humanity did neither. Time, Raymond asked. 3 minutes remaining, Peters replied. Power up all systems. Route maximum energy to shields and weapons. Prepare jump drive for combat maneuvers. Aboard the Eternal Vigilance, Thronix watched the chronometer count down the final seconds. When it reached 0, he gave the order he had given many times before. All ships advance. Target their weapons and engines. Disable them for boarding. The Valkyrie fleet moved forward, weapons charging, shields at maximum. It was a textbook operation, one that should have resulted in quick victory. But the moment his ships entered optimal firing range, everything went wrong in ways Thronix could never have predicted. The human ships moved, not with the steady acceleration of normal drives, but with sudden, impossible bursts of speed that made them appear to teleport across short distances. One moment they were in defensive orbit, the next they were scattered throughout the battlefield in positions that gave them clear firing lines on vulnerable sections of Council ships. Evasive maneuvers, Thronix shouted. But it was already too late. The Valiant appeared directly alongside one of his heavy cruisers, so close that their shields nearly touched. Before the cruiser could react, the human ship fired something his sensors had never seen before. Beams of superheated plasma, contained within magnetic fields that allowed them to maintain coherence far longer than conventional energy weapons, struck the cruiser's shields. The shields, designed to deflect or absorb standard weapons fire, simply failed under the onslaught. The plasma lances punched through the hull in 3 places, venting atmosphere and causing critical systems failures. All across the battlefield, the same scene repeated itself. Human ships appeared and disappeared using their impossible drives, striking and moving before Council vessels could acquire targeting locks. Their weapons tore through shields that had protected Council fleets for centuries. And when Council ships managed to hit them, their own weapons seemed to do minimal damage, the human shields absorbing hits that should have crippled them. How are they doing this? Thronix demanded, watching his fleet fall into chaos. Their technology is supposed to be inferior? Their shields are regenerating, Admiral, his tactical officer reported, her comm beginning to crack. They absorb our fire and redistribute the energy. And their drives, they are using some form of short-range spatial displacement. Our targeting systems cannot predict their movements. A destroyer off his port side simply ceased to exist, torn apart by concentrated fire from 2 human ships that appeared from nowhere. Another heavy cruiser reported critical damage and began falling out of formation. One of his dreadnoughts, the unyielding Resolve, fired its main batteries at the Valiant massive energy beams that should have vaporized the smaller human ship. The Valiant's shields flared bright but held, and the human ship returned fire with those devastating plasma lances, scoring hits along the dreadnought's starboard side. Thronix made a decision he had never expected to make. All ships, retreat. Fall back to Rally Point Gamma. But retreating proved almost as difficult as fighting. The human ships harried his fleet as it withdrew, appearing and disappearing like ghosts, striking damaged vessels and destroying those too slow to keep up with the retreat. By the time Thronix's battered fleet reached the system's edge and jumped to faster-than-light speeds, he had lost 6 ships completely destroyed, including 2 dreadnoughts, and another dozen damaged so severely they would require months of repairs. The Battle of New Dublin lasted only 15 minutes from first. In those 15 minutes, the military balance of the galaxy shifted in ways that would take the Council years to understand. Aboard the Valiant, Captain Raymond stood on her bridge watching the last Council ship disappear from her sensors. Her own vessel had taken damage. Shield generators operating at 70% capacity and hull breaches on 3 decks, but they had held. New Dublin remained in human hands. Casualties? She asked quietly. 17 injured, none critical, Commander Liu reported. All other ships in the fleet report similar numbers. No vessels lost. Raymond nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what they had just accomplished. They had fought a Council fleet and won, not through superior numbers or even superior technology alone, but through tactics and determination and the willingness to risk everything for their homes. The Council had assumed they would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, humanity had proven that force alone was not enough. Send a message to Earth, Raymond ordered. Tell them New Dublin stands. Tell them the Council retreated. And tell them this is just the beginning. Far away on Zenith Prime, the Council would soon receive Admiral Thronix's report and sensor data from the battle. They would analyze it, debate it, and slowly come to realize that their assumptions about humanity had been dangerously wrong. But that realization would come too late to stop what was now in motion. The Council had tested humanity's resolve and found it unbreakable. They had dismissed human capability and discovered it formidable. and they had assumed their power would always be sufficient. To enforce their will, that assumption was about to cost them. Everything the Grand Chamber of Zenith Prime stood, silent as Ambassador Velthorian presented his analysis. To the assembled council members, 3 weeks had passed since the disaster at Earth, and the political shockwaves were still spreading across the galaxy. Member species were questioning council authority. Minor powers were asserting independence, and several civilizations had already begun secret negotiations with humanity. The foundation of galactic order, built over thousands of years, was cracking under the weight of one simple truth. The council had been defeated. Speaker Threnzak was gone, removed from power by a vote of no confidence that had been unanimous. In his place sat Velthorian, the Luminary ambassador, who had warned them repeatedly that their arrogance would lead to disaster. His crystalline form reflected the starlight in patterns of concern and determination as he addressed his fellow council members with uncomfortable truths they could no longer ignore. "We made 3 fundamental errors," Velthorian said, his light patterns translating into words that echoed through the chamber. "First, we assumed that technological advancement follows a predictable linear path. We believed that, because humanity had been in space for only 2 centuries, their capabilities would be proportional to that time frame. We were wrong. Human innovation does not follow our models. They make intuitive leaps that bypass traditional research progression. They think differently than we do, and that difference allowed them to develop technologies that caught us completely unprepared." He paused, allowing the council members to absorb this before continuing. "Second, we mistook patience for weakness. Humanity spent 3 years negotiating with us, offering compromise after compromise. We interpreted this as evidence that they feared us and would eventually submit to any demands we made. Instead, their patience was strategic discipline. While we congratulated ourselves on our superiority, they were buying time to prepare for exactly what has now occurred." General Corvin shifted in his seat, his insectoid form clicking with agitation. The Threnox military commander had been promoted after Supreme Admiral Kelthor's capture during the battle. His first task had been to assess whether continued military action against humanity was viable. His report had been devastatingly clear. It was not. The third error, Velthorian continued, was the most damaging. We allowed our arrogance to blind us to what humanity was truly offering. They did not come to the council seeking permission to exist among the stars. They came seeking partnership, cooperation, and mutual respect. We could have had humanity as allies, as friends, as valuable contributors to galactic civilization. Instead, we treated them as children who needed to learn their place. We threw away an opportunity that will not come again. Ambassador Kethel of the Sorvani spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of genuine curiosity. "What do we know of their current military capabilities? Can we defeat them if we commit our full resources?" General Corvin responded, his mandibles clicking as he accessed his tactical reports. "My analysis suggests that continued warfare with humanity is strategically unwinnable. Their industrial capacity, now fully mobilized for military production, can replace losses faster than we can inflict them. They are fielding new ship designs, incorporating their advanced technologies at a rate that exceeds our projections. Their jump drive technology gives them tactical mobility advantages we cannot counter with current systems. And most critically, their population has demonstrated a willingness to accept casualties in defense of their territory that far exceeds anything we have encountered in modern warfare." He brought up a holographic display showing casualty projections for various military scenarios. If we were to launch another major offensive against Earth or their core colonies, we would need to commit resources that would leave our own territories vulnerable. The political cost within our own populations would be severe. Multiple member species have already expressed unwillingness to commit further forces after the losses at Earth. And even if we achieved military victory, the cost would be so high that our civilization would be crippled for generations. The chamber fell silent as council members processed this information. The reality was harsh but undeniable. Humanity could not conquer the council, but the Council could no longer force humanity to submit. The war had reached a stalemate. Continuing it would destroy both sides. Velthorian's light patterns shifted to something that might have been hope. I propose that we request genuine peace negotiations with humanity. Not on our terms, not as demands, but as equals. We acknowledge our errors, we recognize their sovereignty, and we offer them the partnership they originally sought. They will never accept, said Ambassador Drethger of the Kelvin Confederation. We sanctioned them, invaded their colonies, and attempted to conquer their homeworld. Why would they trust anything we offer now? Because, Velthorian replied, humanity has proven they do not seek conquest or domination. If they did, they would be pressing their advantage now, forging alliances against us, preparing offensive operations. Instead, their fleet remains in defensive positions. They have made no moves against Council territory. Their diplomatic communications to other species emphasize cooperation and mutual benefit, not vengeance. Humanity wants what they always wanted, to be recognized as equals and allowed to exist in peace. The debate continued for hours, but eventually a consensus emerged. The Council voted to request peace negotiations, this time approaching humanity with genuine respect rather than arrogance. The question now was whether humanity would accept, or whether the damage done was too severe to repair. On Mars, in a human station orbiting the Red Planet, President Helen Carter received the Council's formal request for peace talks. Her cabinet was divided on how to respond. Secretary of Defense Gregory Stone argued for pressing their advantage, using their newfound military strength to reshape galactic politics by force. Secretary of State Marcus Webb warned that such a path would lead only to endless war and transform humanity into the very thing they had fought against. Carter called for Admiral Jack Preston's assessment. The Admiral, still recovering from injuries sustained during the Battle of Earth, sat in a wheelchair, but his mind remained sharp and his voice steady. Madam President, I have spent the last 3 weeks visiting hospitals, attending funerals, and speaking with the families of those we lost. 7,000 people died defending Earth. Thousands more will carry the scars of that battle for the rest of their lives. I have looked into the eyes of parents who lost children, children who lost parents, and spouses who lost partners. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We proved we can fight. We proved we can win. But winning battles is not the same as building a future. Humanity did not go to space seeking to conquer or to prove our superiority through violence. We went seeking community, cooperation, and a place among the civilizations of the galaxy. The Council forced us to fight, and we did what we had to do. But if they are genuinely ready to treat us as equals, then I believe we should meet them halfway. President Carter nodded slowly. Admiral Preston is right. We fought because we had no choice, but we did not fight to become conquerors. If the Council is willing to negotiate in good faith, then we will negotiate. But not on their station, not on their terms. The talks will be held here on Mars, where they can see firsthand what humanity has built. The negotiations began 2 months later in a conference facility, overlooking the Martian colonies that humanity had built through decades of hard work. The Council delegation, led by Ambassador Velthorian, arrived with genuine humility rather than arrogance. The first session was tense, with both sides carrying the weight of recent bloodshed. But there was also a fundamental shift in the atmosphere. The Council delegates listened when humans spoke, considered their proposals seriously, and engaged in actual discussion rather than simply issuing demands. The talks lasted for months. There were disagreements, heated debates, and moments when it seemed the negotiations might collapse. But both sides showed flexibility that had been absent from previous discussions. The Council acknowledged that human colonies were legitimate sovereign territory. Humanity agreed to participate in galactic governance systems rather than remaining isolated. Technologies were shared, not demanded or surrendered, but exchanged between partners. The final treaty established humanity as a full member of the Galactic Council with equal voting rights and representation. It created joint task forces for frontier security and scientific research. It established economic partnerships that benefited all parties. But more than the specific terms, The treaty represented a fundamental change in how the galaxy operated. Power was no longer concentrated solely in the hands of elder races. Younger species had a voice, and that voice carried weight, earned through courage, rather than granted as a favor. 5 years after the treaty signing, Admiral Lisa Raymond stood on the bridge of her flagship, commanding a joint task force of human and council ships patrolling the outer frontier. Her crew included not just humans but Velkari, Luminari, and Threnox as well, species that had been enemies now working side by side. The transition had not been easy. Cultural differences created friction, and old prejudices died slowly. But they made it work through mutual effort and growing respect in the council chambers on Zenith Prime. Ambassador Jack Preston represented Earth's interests with a voice that carried authority earned through proven strength and demonstrated wisdom. The other council members listened when he spoke, not because they feared humanity's military, but because they had learned that human perspectives had value. Preston had retired from military service to take this role, believing that winning the peace was more important than winning wars, Captain. Ben Hamilton commanded the defense of the Kepler Expanse, the disputed territory that had sparked the entire crisis. The colonies thrived now, their populations growing, and their economies flourishing. Ships from a dozen different species passed through the region peacefully, trading and cooperating in ways that would have seemed impossible 6 years earlier. President Carter stood in her office overlooking the rebuilt orbital stations around Earth, watching ships from across the galaxy dock at human facilities. Some came for trade, others for diplomatic meetings. Still others simply out of curiosity to see the world that had defied the Council and changed the galaxy. She thought about the cost of everything that had happened. The thousands who had died, the ships destroyed, the families torn apart by war. The price had been terrible, but it had bought something precious. Recognition, not of humanity's power, but of their fundamental right to exist as equals. Dr. Nathan Cross continued his research. Now in partnership with scientists from other species, the technologies that had saved humanity in war were now being adapted for peaceful purposes, shared with others, and combined with alien knowledge to push the boundaries of what was possible. His jump drive was being refined by Luminari engineers, while human plasma lance technology was being studied by Threnox scientists for industrial applications. The galaxy had not become peaceful overnight. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still species and factions that preferred the old ways. But something fundamental had shifted. The idea that might made right, that elder races could dictate terms to younger ones simply because they had been in space longer, had been challenged and found wanting. Humanity had proven that respect had to be earned through character and defended through courage, not granted from above. On Zenith Prime, in the Grand Council chamber, where humanity had once been dismissed,